You could call this a love letter to all gardeners and homesteaders that are interested in really stepping up the ball game and, you know, really amping up your production. This is a hard part of YouTube for me, but I stand by this, and I told myself from the beginning I would show you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and today we're going to do all of that. Then I went and got dirt the other day, and we've been trying to get everything going, and this, because we had to put this extra little bit of depth on there, really messed up my calculations. So we've got to go get more dirt, which I'm going to do as soon as this video is over, more than likely. I'm just ready to be done with this project. I swear this has been the most painful expansion project I've done to date, and I'm telling you, I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. Every year we have to go get dirt, and I don't have a problem with that, but it's just been every single, I mean, it's been 2 times a week. We've been shoveling 4,000 pounds of soil a week by hand, and it's rough. So we're almost done, thankfully. And we're done to the point where we can be. But we've already planted, and I know what you're thinking, aha, you shouldn't have planted so early, and that's actually not it at all. But what it is we started, and I had to change a couple things this year, and hindsight's really 2020, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Broccoli bed, and you can see we in fact have a little bit of loss going on here. We've lost 5 plants so far. We may lose a couple more, and this is by a simple mistake. Simple, avoidable, but nevertheless it still happened. And so what's going on here is we changed our fertilizer regimen, and I had to take out basically anything that stinks because of the pest pressure around here. And when I say pest pressure, what I mean is the mammals. They are a whole different world of pest pressure that's really hard to get under control. So shout out to the person who said that they used urea and they burned their plants. I wish I would have seen that a little bit earlier. We have in fact burnt our plants with our urea. There was 0 directions on the package, 0. I mean, it did tell you how much to use, and typically when we use blood meal, it's a different acting. So what I didn't realize is that it was a quick acting fertilizer. So we planted everything. I think right now for this broccoli bed, because it's a little bit ahead of the other 2 beds, we are on the back side of it, hopefully, and I'll tell you what I've done to try and minimize it. But you know, we made the mistake. I recognized it early on, and I'm like, well, there's not much I can do. And so what I did, came in here, and I knew, like, for instance, right here, there's an issue. So I kind of dug around to see if I could see it, and I couldn't find any of it. I knew how far down I had dug my furrow. And so what that told me was that actually broke down into the soil quickly. So I couldn't remove it. So what I did is I read up on urea. Wish I would have done that before, but again, hindsight's 2020. I realized, and you can see how all the soil is kind of scratched up and dug up, is they say you bury it in your plants because as it off gases, it'll feed. So I said, well, let me do this. Let me go ahead and dig up the soil, scratch it all up, and try and get it to off gas outside of the soil so it's a little bit weaker of a dose. So you can see we've lost a couple plants. We've got like this one right here. It's looking rough, but it may pull through. We're just gonna have to wait and see. We do have some backup, so it's not a really big issue, but this is kind of part of it. We planted these 2 beds as well, and they are showing the same symptoms, not as bad. We did the lettuce in here, and I already knew this was an issue, so I cut back on it, and I'm not seeing as much damage. Now, part of it too, part of these losses in here is in the seed cells. They were overcrowded, and some of them just kind of outgrew the other ones. And I think what initially happened is we put them in, and because they weren't really getting full amount of sun, they got burnt. And that's just how it happens. So these things happen. But the moral of this story and everything that I want to tell y'all is, you know, if you don't know something, like, try it. Because I can tell you this, I can 100% tell you this mistake will never happen again. And if you don't know about me and you're new to the channel, the whole reason why I do all of this is in case one day I don't have access to food, which we've had multiple times in our lives, but I want to know how to do it. And if the urea is an issue, then either one, we can eliminate it, two, we can modify how we use it, which is what we're going to do because I still have 3/4 of a bag left. So we're going to modify how we use it. So how do we modify that? What do we take from this situation? Well, things first, we're going to plant, and we're not going to put the urea in at first at all. So we'll plant and then we'll just leave it. We'll put our regular fertilizer in, but not our urea, because even though it's not a synthetic fertilizer, it's one of the few organic fertilizers, which I didn't realize at the time, that will absolutely break down almost immediately and start to feed. So we're going to hold off, let the plants get comfortable in the bed, and then we'll come back a month later, and then we'll give it a light sprinkling on the surface. And then we'll let it off gas a little bit on there. So we've learned about all of that completely. How do I know to cut back on it, right? Well, let me show you how I know, because we've used it before with success. This wasn't the first time we used it. So we used it in the greenhouse on this broccoli, and I'll show you. And see, our broccoli is looking real good in here. We have had zero issues with it. It didn't wilt. There's no burnt browning of the leaves, nothing like that. But we did a very light surface feeding on that. It's occurred to me I should show you the symptoms of over-fertilization, just so you know. So you can put it in your books as well. So we'll come over here and I'll kind of break it down for you how it was unfolding and what my thought process was. This was the first one to go right here in the middle of the screen here. And I didn't think too much of it because, again, you know, some of them were so overcrowded that I'm like, well, maybe it just started to get burnt. But then I started to see this. And this is a telltale sign of over-fertilization, the browning on the edges of the leaves. So as soon as I saw that, I said, okay. And I actually thought this plant would die, but it hasn't really changed much. And we're seeing some fluctuations, and I do believe that this has helped the scratching of the surface. But I mean, like, we dig right along the furrows for the drip line, and about this deep, and I mean, I'm not seeing anything in there, so I know that it got used up, but we're just going to go ahead and roll with it. So that's the signs of it. And then another sign is that your plants will start wilting and dying. So we've got a couple that are jacked up. We've got a couple that may end up being stunted. So like this one over here that we showed you, there's hope. And I want to run it. I want to see what happens. Oh, look, there's a piece of glass in there. That's fun. So yeah, I want to see what happens here. I want to see if it actually corrects itself and if we can get a harvest off of this. Still have time. Not to mention, tomorrow we're supposed to get, so our weather is really stupid right now. I'm in coastal North Carolina. My zone doesn't matter. Coastal North Carolina, right now it's 55 degrees. It was 70 the other day. Tomorrow's a high of 38, low of 22 for the next 3 days. It's going to be about like that. But we're supposed to get a lot of rain. And so the one benefit of that is, and I'm going to cover this bed tonight, because what we have here, last night it was 27, but what we have, the situation we have unfolding is some of these plants are stressed. And so the temperature won't necessarily kill them, but with the stress of everything else going on, then it could actually finish the job off. So we're going to cover them tonight, but it's supposed to rain all day tomorrow. So I'm going to uncover these beds and let that rain soak it down. And in theory, what could happen is it will help leach out some of that nitrogen. So we've been watering fairly heavily. I didn't want to like overwater and have like all these different issues unfolding, but we're going to water heavily and it's all going to leach out. And then hopefully we can, not all of it, but you know, we can start to get it to leach out and then move on. So these two beds are exhibiting symptoms too, not as bad, but they are. And we also had on top of that, for these two beds, I put them in, and then the next day, I'll show you what happened. We had like 50-mile-an-hour winds, bro. It was terrible. And we actually had some damage. Lost our trellis here, so I've got to fix this. we'll make lemonade out of lemons. I'll make this better. I thought about not even putting it back, but I do like the look of the trellis there. So we're gonna fix that and just change it. But you know, we started getting damage, a little bit crazy, not gonna lie. So, you know, we planted those plants, didn't see the forecasts and they weren't even really predicting it getting crazy like that. But as soon as we planted, it started coming in and they're calling for 40, 50 mile an hour winds. I'm like, great, here we go. And then a large downpour and a freshly planted, it didn't work out well. So that's part of it as well, as we're having multiple issues. So if we look in here, you can see they're not too happy. And it's not as bad as it could be. Nevertheless, it's still an issue. But I don't want you to be scared to try things. And what I don't really want, and I hate it when people do this, is they want to see somebody else do it and they don't want to try something. Well, you got to try something and you got to fail to learn. It's just how it is. You got to fail in order to learn and progress into what you're doing. And don't be scared. Don't be afraid to try something new. And if you fail, say, screw it, I messed up. Own up to it and change it, right? So we were able to, so far with all of this planting, we were able to see, okay, got 27 degrees last night, did not kill anything, but we already were exhibiting the issues. So I knew the issues that were coming. I've been checking the plants daily. I knew how they looked. I go out morning and night to kind of check them, see if there's any change. And when I came out today, there was no change after that hard freeze. Now I will say this, because these are such young plants, even though they are hardy, we are going to protect them and just keep them safe. But don't be scared. Be prepared, make the mistake and change it. That's how I learned how to grow more, grow earlier, plant earlier, step outside of the bounds, do this, do that. You know, there's so many products on the market, you can't keep up with it. You can't keep up with it. And will I use the urea again? Absolutely. I'm just going to use it differently because now I know. Now I know the mistakes that were made and I changed it. And it's really hard to come onto YouTube and tell like, hey, this is me and I messed up. You know, you want to see something perfect, but that's not me, because gardening is not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Only one person in the history of humankind has been perfect. And it is definitely not me or any of you. And our gardens aren't perfect. We're always going to make mistakes and we're always going to have issues. But if you don't talk about those issues, you will never learn. Success does not come from success. Success comes from failure. You'll do good to remember that in your gardening thing. And that's my preachy moment. So that's gardening, right? So what mistakes have you made in your garden? You know, and how did you correct it? Let us know, because I don't want this to be a place where everybody thinks everybody's perfect, because that's not the case, as we just said. And it happens every year. I think every year each season I make a different mistake. This one was a pretty good one. Last year's mistake was planting all of my peppers in one bed and they shaded each other out. So I learned my lesson there. So as we go through the season and we get ready to start planting, I will start telling you like, hey, I did this before and I'm changing it to this. And then you'll start to see how those mistakes will help you progress further and further. I can tell you this, absolutely tell you this. I'll never plant a tomato plant in February on a warm day again like I did many years ago.